Hello and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always, we have Matt, Mick, and Rainier.
Hey.
Unfortunately, in this week's episode, Devin couldn't be with us. We're going to be going over a list by Joshua Devoy, and then we're going to be moving into the main topic for today, which is going to be Minas Tirith heroes. So before that, Matt, I know you had something that you wanted to talk about.
Sure. So to start out, has anybody other than me played a game with any of the new Quest of the Ring Bearer lists?
No.
Has anybody other than
still a
me?
pandemic.
Yeah. Well, has anybody other than me played a game?
No.
No.
Has anybody other than me left their house?
I did.
I
Today, actually.
mean, if I got the mail, does that count?
I suppose it technically does. So we played a couple games here with New Quest of the Ring Bearer list, and I think given that we talked about them last time, it's worth discussing our results. So I played a game with the new Balrog list. I can't remember what it's called at the moment, but everybody knows it as the new Balrog list. And this was the subject of a lot of discussion last time, especially from Rob and Devin, who thought that the Balrog was overpowered. I don't think that's the case based on my one data point. The list does, in fact, suffer from the same issues as the last, as a typical Moria Balrog list does, in that you only have one Balrog and that Balrog can be only in one place. And we played the retrieval scenario, which is essentially the game of capture the flag. It's one of the new 6 scenarios in the match play guide where there's an objective. You divide the board diagonally, so you each have your own triangle to deploy on. And you have a objective in your backfield that you can't move, but the other guy's trying to grab and take back to his side of the field and get off the board. And then there's another objective in the other guy's field that you're trying to grab and bring back to your side of the board and get off the field. And I had my Balrog. I had the Moria drums because I don't have a Black Shield drum. That might be a better option, but I don't have one. And a bunch of goblins, and I had a couple of captains to usher the Balrog around. I think we were playing 700 points. And I was playing against a Minas Tirith army that had Boromir the White Tower with his banner, and it had, I think, the 2 new ranger heroes with a bunch of rangers, and I think it had Irolas in it as another hero. And so we had, kind of Boromir facing off against the Balrog, and my opponent fairly wisely, I think, took Boromir, who is his only mounted figure, and sent him on an end run around one end of the battlefield just to get at my objective, and then just kind of piled up the rest of his army between the Balrog and his objective. So I had a dilemma. No matter how many goblins I was going to put in front of Boromir, I wasn't going to stop him getting to the objective. The only thing that could really check Boromir was the Balrog. So I decide whether I wanted to try and bowl through and get at his objective or use my Balrog to counter Boromir. And I decided to play it safe, use my Balrog to counter Boromir, which he did. He prevented Boromir from getting to the objective, was never able to get into Boromir. The Balrog always seems to underperform in some way or another. And this particular time, it was my Balrog missing. I had 4 chances to do a whip attack to try and get that free heroic combat, and managed to miss all 4 times that the Balrog had the opportunity to use his whip. But you can use the Balrog with a couple heroic marches to get in the way of Boromir. Eventually, Boromir circled back and tried to punch through the center. But what it essentially did was check me and keep me from being able to get anywhere near his objective. So we ended up playing a defensive game. I think we ended up calling it after about 2 hours. And I think in the end, I ended up getting 1 point because Boromir finally, by the end, was down to, I think, 1 wound, 0 fate, was off his horse and was on fire, but was not dead. And we had beaten on each other. It's an interesting list because I think had I not been playing that legendary Legion, I would have lost because I would have broken. because the goblins don't hold up that well, although they do hold up significantly better now. I think that they have the table-wide Moria drum. I actually was finding I was killing almost, but not quite, 1-for-1 against Minas Tirith just because of the kind of battlefield effect of that drum, combined with the fact that one of the things that my opponent sacrificed when he sent Boromir on his end run was his 6-inch banner in the center. Once it got back around to the center, things were, kind of turning against the ordinary goblins, but at that point the Balrog could wade in and start to do some damage. So I think it's definitely an interesting list. It's definitely stronger than it was before, but it's not going to be a world beater, particularly in an objective scenario that depends on mobility like this one did. That's still a weakness for the Balrog list. So those are my thoughts on the Balrog list.
I mean, if you just rolled more sixes, you would have probably won easily. So I'm not sure, like, if that's much of an evaluation. Just draw better.
No, I mean, well, yeah, okay, so that's probably true. The way my opponent was playing it, I would have, I think, had a shot if I'd made the whip attacks to get into Boromir. But on the other hand, I might have just killed the guy that I was whipping to try and get the extra heroic combat move. And of course, given that it's the Balrog, I could also have run into Boromir, rolled a 5 highest, and had Boromir mighted up to a 6 and lose. So who knows how that would have come out.
So now I know we talked about this in the last episode, but so you said you went with the regular drums because you didn't have the black shields, but if you had the option for both after playing, I know it's hard after that one specific game, but would you have gone with the ability to move the drums, or would you kept doing them back corner?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think it mattered. I actually had kind of a nice building that I just set up the drums inside, and they just proceeded to beat the whole game, which was, I think, one thing that helped me out on the flank that Boromir was not on. I had a big, large building that I could sit in and fortify with my goblins and defend windows and things like that. They tended to get shot out of the windows by the Rangers, but it did give me kind of a terrain advantage on the other side, the side that Boromir wasn't in running on.
Did you use the shadow and flame roll with the one, or did that not really pop up in the game?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's how Boromir ended up on fire. I mean, the Balrog did have two significant contributions to the game. One was being able to pitch a guy through Boromir and knock him off his horse, and then being able to get within 3 inches of Boromir and set him on fire. So the flame rule really does allow you, if the other guy's got one big hitter, you basically save the flame rule for that big hitter, and you set him on fire, you chip some wounds off him and make him so he has to roll around on the ground to try and put it out.
Is there any kind of real big weaknesses that you found with the list in that one game, or was it just too early to make a weakness kind of?
Well, I mean, it's the same weakness as before. You have one Balrog that's terrifying and a whole bunch of little goblins that really aren't. Mm-hmm. And if the Balrog has to go off and do something to check a big opponent, then the rest of your army is just a bunch of goblins. And it does help now that they're just a bunch of goblins that all have an automatic banner reroll, so they're somewhat more likely to win the fights, but they're still just a bunch of goblins. And that's, I think, the strategy when you play against this list is you got to kind of lure the Balrog off in one direction and then kill the parts of the army that aren't near him. And yeah, that kind of depends on, or at least that's going to be significantly easier to do if you have a scenario where the army just can't ball up. That's going to be a lot harder to do if the army can ball up. But even if the army is balling up, the Balrog can only be on one side of the ball, and you just pick on the other side of the ball.
Also, there's this whole thing with in this new Legion, you can't have bat swarms, right? And you can't have things like Durbers or any other named heroes. So how are you finding the lack of like heroic strikes and bat swarms in particular?
So, bat swarms would be nice. I understand why they're not there. But But I don't know, the way I at least used to play the Balrog list, because the Balrog's so expensive, I really just dumped points into goblins because you just always wanted more goblins. And I think the bat swarms are what, 35 points? So that's seven goblins.
Yeah, 7 goblins.
I mean, that's a lot of goblins. And I mean, your big hitter who's going to be doing the killing is fight 10 anyway. So, you know, it's not clear that the bat swarms are really that great an add to the list in any case. And you know what you do is you basically get a bunch of just generic captains with no additional war gear. I think I gave one guy a bow just because I had a couple points left over. Oh, you know what it was? I had filled out all the war bands I had available, so I had 5 points left over that I couldn't buy another goblin. So I gave one of the guys a bow. But all they do is they're the Balrog's little friends, and they just follow him around and call a march when he needs to go quicker or call a move when he needs to go first, and that's their job.
Now I have a question. If you could rank the list at a 6-game tournament, 1 through 10, how would you rank it?
Let's see. So 10 being the best?
10 being the best, 1 being the worst.
I'd say it's probably a 7 or 8. I think if you're playing and that's assuming kind of a random scenario generation thing, because I think there are going to be some scenarios that's just going to dominate, and that, like, you know, contest of champions, and then there are going to be some scenarios that it's really going to struggle with, like domination. And you know, if you are going to a tournament where you know what the scenarios are, and you know that there aren't going to be the types of scenarios that it's going to have a problem with, then I think it's a really good list. I mean, if you're going to a competition where the scenarios were like command and control, contest of champions, and I'm trying to think of another one where you're kind of doing a slugfest in the middle, then it's, you know, going to be one of the ones near the top.
One last thing before we move on. Shamans, the Black Shield Shamans. Do you wish you had more or less in that game?
I don't know.
How many did you end up taking? Or
I don't own any, so I didn't take any.
Okay.
And I think given that size list, had I taken one, it would have been a problem, because I was at the cap of the number of goblins that I had. That's why I had to spend 5 points to, you know, give a goblin captain a bow. So I think if I had taken a goblin shaman, I would have ended up with like 30 points I didn't have anything to spend on, because I wouldn't have enough slots for guys. So I think that's the problem that I would have had at least at points level.
And not a goblin shaman.
I suppose. Well, actually, how much is a Black Shield Shaman?
Let me pull that up real quick.
But I mean, had I done that, I would have had a really small army.
That's right.
The Black Shield Shaman.
45. No, that's the other one.
50.
50, yeah.
Yep.
So
they're significantly more expensive than a captain.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you could always taken the Moria Black Shield captain for the 200 weapon.
Yes, the debate. Well, Devin's not here to attack him, so I'll do it. No, I'd never take a never take a captain that always gets a -1 on the duel roll. Besides, really all you're buying those captains for is the might points. Yeah. So, you know, you don't want to spend a point more than you have to on those captains.
Okay, so now we're going to go into the list review, where I'll move it over to Mick.
All right, so this week we have a 700-point list from Joshua Devoy. This is a green alliance between heroes, between the Fiefdoms, the Minas Tirith, and Rohan. This is basically Prince Imrahil with armored horse and lance, leading 15 men-at-arms of the Lamroth. Then Huron the Tall mounted, leading 13 guards of the Fountain Court with shields. Then Theoden with an armored horse, shield, and heavy armor, leading 4 riders of Rohan and 1 rider of Rohan with a throwing spear. So his leader is Prince Imrahil, and this is a total of 36 models, 9 might, and 5 bows. So first of all, I really like this list, and it very much reminds me of many lists which I've made in the past, where I was trying to basically maximize some sort of like really good tools that any particular army might have, and just like clump them together and hope that it works. In a lot of cases, it worked, but in a lot of cases, I would often find myself that the list was lacking something. So here, what I really like is that Prince Imrahil is essentially, I think, going to be supporting, the ball of men-at-arms are going to be supporting the Fountain Guards. So you're going to have like a 13 wide line of fight 4, defense 7 troops. Any men-at-arms, if they're close to Prince Imrahil, they will actually go up to fight 5. So if he's keeping the troops, if he's able to keep Imrahil very close to the troops, then they'll be fight 5, potentially with 2 pikes backing a Fountain Guardsman. And everyone gets a banner reroll because of Imrahil's special rule. So I kind of like this in this sort of like optimal ball setting. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of this if in situations where the army might have to split into the different places. Like, for example, I wouldn't want to have Prince Imrahil and 15 men-at-arms just turn up in a place and kind of be surrounded in like a maelstrom situation. And I wouldn't really want the same to happen to Theoden. So I think as a combination in any sort of games where you're able to keep a ball, this is really, really strong. But yeah, it will have its weaknesses in particular scenarios. What about you guys? What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, right off the bat, I agree with Mick that we can see the synergy of the Fountain Court Guards and the Men of Dol Amroth. Your pike block's going to be really good. But I figure the same thing. If I was to play Maelstrom against it, I'd kind of want to see them isolated, because you could pick apart the warbands pretty easily, because only one warband has 1 threat each. I think a way to mitigate that is, I believe that what are the Guard of the Fountain Court with shield 11 points, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. For 2 more points, you can get a Knight of Minas Tirith. The Knight of Minas Tirith not only will give you some mobility for scenario game, but it'll also make your pike block have more flanking action. So I think that's one thing that I would change. Maybe try to fit a couple more into Theoden's warband, but yeah, I think just the one thing that flies off the screen is stay in the same area. Your scenario game might struggle a little bit because of that. And one way to mitigate it is to add a couple Knights of Minas Tirith. You don't even have to add shields, to be honest, too, just if you want to save points, because I see you're trying to maximize as much as possible. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I had the same thoughts. Let me give a couple thoughts of potential ways to fiddle with this list to fix it. So there are a couple weaknesses to this list. One is there's no march in the list. The other, which can be a big problem when you're trying to get guys together in Maelstrom of Battle. Also in scenarios where you got to kind of win the center and then go to different places, which I think this list is probably going to have to do. The other thing is, even though you have a giant banner effect from Prince Imrahil, I don't believe he counts for victory points. Am I right about that, guys?
Let me read off the exact word.
Wait, hold on. Before you go any further, Theoden actually does have March.
Theoden has March. All right. Well, I stand corrected.
He's got March, Strike, and Challenge. So really, he has March and Strike.
Might and Strike. Okay. All right. Well, never mind that then.
So yeah, I don't think he counts, because it says counts as being in range of a banner, not a banner himself.
Right. All right. Well, I guess this is less important since Theoden has March, but one solution you could do to solve I don't have an actual banner, because remember, one of the other issues here is Imrahil's banner only affects the men-at-arms. So you generally always want a banner effect. As much as possible, you want a banner effect to cover your riders. because those riders, you always want the extra die if possible. I mean, one possibility here is to replace Theoden with Gambling with the Banner. So that puts a banner in the list. It creates a banner that's going to influence the riders. Gambling also has March. Gambling's basically going to be giving himself one free might a turn. He's been kind of reduced to the point where you can only affect one hero a turn with the banner. But of course, if all you have is Gambling, then that really isn't a big deal anymore. The riders would drop from fight 4 to fight 3 because Theoden wouldn't be around anymore. But the counter to that is that they're going to get an extra die. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing to think about here, which because I think Mick's point is valid, that this army has some big problems if it ends up dispersed in Maelstrom of Battle, or if you get the divide and conquer scenario, then is possibly replacing Huron with Madril, so that you get the +1 to deployment in Maelstrom of Battle. You lose a hitty mounted hero. But I think if you did that, you would probably save enough points, because you're saving 35 points just by making that change.
Then you have to get rid of the Fountain Court guard as well, so there's another 11.
Well, you'd have to get rid of at least one of them, and I think frankly,
no. I have a question. Are these changes legal with the new format? Because don't you have to lead a hero of?
Because you got Madril.
Well, no, but they're green. They're green.
Alliance,
So
yeah,
you just
that makes sense.
The Green Alliance, so it works.
I was like, oh no.
Yeah, so you could take Madril. That means you got a 12-person warband. So you drop one guard of the Fountain Court. You could also, I think, I actually am not sure you actually need guard of the Fountain Court with this list, because you've already got fight 4 from the Men-at-Arms of Dol Amroth and fight 5 if they're near Prince Imrahil. So you could actually just drop I've run a version of this list that just had Minas Tirith warriors with shields, and that saves you 3 points a figure. And I suspect between dropping Huron to Madril and saving those 3 points a figure and dropping one guard of the Fountain Court, you've got enough for another cheap warband. And I think probably a good add to this list would be Dwayne here and some Blackroot Vale archers, who are all fairly cheap and would give you a significant amount of shooting power in this list, which is something it doesn't really have. It has the 5 bows from the riders, which aren't really going to do all that much. But you could add in even just a half dozen Blackroot Vale archers, and with Dwayne here, can do a lot of damage with all the special rules and special benefits that he gives.
I'm not sure you're actually able to do that fully, because Huron and let's say 12 Fountain Guards into Minas Tirith Warriors, that's going to give you 70 points extra?
So that's 70, plus you got another 11 from the guard of the
so
Fountain Court is 81.
So
you may have to drop
into Gambling. It's actually -10. So you sort of end up with like 71.
Yeah, I'm not saying you do all of these things. This is kind of a pick and mix. I mean, you could always drop a rider of Rohan if you wanted a few extra points. You could drop a couple Men-at-Arms of Dol Amroth if you wanted to get some extra points. These are just ideas. But I suspect the points are there to get, because let's see, how many points is Dwayne here?
I always feel like Theoden doesn't really belong here with his Rohan, and I would rather just have Forlong the Fat, or someone,
which is another way to do it. Yeah, that was I guess my next thought is you could get rid of Theoden and replace him with Forlong the Fat, and throw some to get your mounted hitting power. Maybe throw some Knights of Dol Amroth on horse in with Prince Imrahil's warband.
Heck, you could also do Eomer and get kind of like the triple threat from up. I guess you'll lose your heroic march, but if you want to play the power triple threat, Eomer, Huron, and Prince Imrahil are pretty strong together.
Yeah.
See, I kind of like the idea of sticking with a. I'm going to piggyback off Matt. I like the idea of Madril and 12 Minas Tirith warriors, and then I would just add as many riders to Theoden's warband, because then you complement the shooting. You have mobility, and you have a lot of hitting power at that point. Because then your riders are strength 4 on the charge. Plus you have, you probably go up to 9 or 10 riders. Plus you'd have the guys on the ground. You have a ton of mobility to get in behind. Plus you have Theoden who can hit. Then you have Imrahil who can hit. And then you have Madril to make sure you all deploy together. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways you could go on this. One would be to change the Huron warband to a Madril warband and use the points to bulk out the riders and just have a bunch of guys with Theoden. Another way, which I think is equally valid, is making my suggestion of do that same thing so that you get the warriors, and then maybe you drop Theoden in as well, and you put those extra points. Well, okay, so what? At that point, what you end up with is a fiefdoms list that has either Dwayne here or Forlong the Fat and a bunch of additional fiefdoms with a warband of Gondor to make sure that they sit in the center. I mean, one advantage to that approach, by the way, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the fiefdom guys have the Gondor keyword. So by adding in one warband from Gondor, you basically increase the courage of everybody in your army by +1. Is that right?
I don't think that's right, because it says here friendly Gondor models from this army list increase their courage value by
from
1.
this army list. All right. Well, that would have been nice, but
it would have been nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, I mean, the pikemen are courage 3, so I mean they're average. I mean, yes, you'd like the +1, of course, to courage 4, but they're not. They're average. They're okay. You'd want a little bit higher, but they're not bad.
Yep.
I mean, for me here, it's actually that I really love the Guards of the Founding Court, and if I can take to any of them, I will. But in this list, because of how expensive Prince Imrahil is, and how expensive the guards are, and how expensive everything is, really, I'm not 100% sure whether they should be guards of the Founding Court. So I kind of agree with Matt here on dropping them into Warriors of Minas Tirith.
You think he did it because he wanted to maintain the defense 7? You think that was kind of the concept?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's defense 7 and bodyguard, right?
Oh, the bodyguard makes it. Yeah.
But I'm not convinced. I mean, because the warriors, as long as you put them in a wall, are going to be defense 7 against shooting anyway. I think it's less important that they have defense 7 against, in melee. And another option here is instead of Forlong the Fat or Dwayne here, you throw in Angbor the Fearless, and then everybody from the fiefdoms list becomes fearless.
I mean, hold on, because if let's say
within 6 inches of him,
we were to follow up with this change of Guards of the Founding Court into Minas Tirith, then that's 39 points. Then let's say you drop one of them, that's like 40.
It's 39. Well, it's 39 points. Plus, you got to drop one of the Guard of the Fountain Court, because you can only have a warband of 12 if you're doing Madril.
Yeah, but I'm actually thinking, what if you leave here and there?
Oh, okay.
Then drop one Fountain Court, swap all the remaining Fountain Courts for Warriors of Minas Tirith, then drop, let's say, 2 Riders of Rohan, and that essentially gives you a Forlong the Fat mounted for like 2 models less in the army. So then you end up with Imrahil, Huron, Theoden, and Forlong all mounted, all hitting, whilst you have like let's say 33 models. So you're maximizing the number of your heavier heroes without really sacrificing that much in terms of your infantry or anything else.
That's a reasonable way to do it.
I kind of like that, actually. Yeah.
And Forlong gets a banner as long as he's within 12 inches of Imrahil.
Yeah.
And then all of the pikemen get to reroll ones.
And to be fair, at 700
Oh, yeah.
points, that's a lot to deal with for hero wise, while
Yep.
still being able to hold the line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just go on Games Workshop website in a second.
Yeah, I know. That's a good way to do it.
All right, so Josh, I think that's kind of our general consensus. Is we almost everything we've said is about dropping the Fountain Cord to Warriors of Minas Tirith, and then I think we all kind of agreed at the end that we really liked the idea that Mick came up with dropping a couple of guys and going for 4 long, and then you have 4 really big heroes while still having decent numbers. But try it out and let us know how it goes. We're going to move into the main topic for today, which is the heroes of Minas Tirith. And we have to start off with the big guy himself, Aragorn. So I'm going to move that over to Mick. Now, I have to say, this is my favorite good model in the entire game.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite good model too. In fact, my favorite good model in the entire game. Good and evil. So he costs humongous amount. When he is mounted on Namorn horse, it's 240.
You always take
Hero of Legend. Yeah, you always take the armored horse. So it's insane how expensive he is. But fight 6, shooting value of 3+ with no bow, so might one day be useful for the first scenario. Strength 4, defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, 6 courage. Might will fade at 3 with Mighty Hero, Undrill, Flame of the West, so always wounds everything on force. And Horse Lord rule, which protects his horse from dying to any bow fire on 4+ from fate rolls. As well as the Stand Man of the West special rule, which gives all friendly models within 6 of Aragorn, which includes himself, they count as being in range of a banner. So yeah, there's quite a lot here, and I think the points are fully justified because of how powerful he is. So I generally find LSR to be best in all hero armies, obviously. Because you take him, and then all of your other heroes in your little bubble, everyone gets the banner reroll. But obviously, not many players play those lists. So in normal armies, Aragorn is always going to be very good for things like free heroic marches, most importantly, and just the late game where everyone starts running out of might, and you yourself will never be able to run out. So yeah, he's just generally really, really strong in virtually every situation. His fight value is not really 6, it's always 7 or higher, because if you do need to strike, you will be striking, and it's always going to be a free hero strike, essentially. One thing that I've always found whilst playing him, and I played Aragorn quite a lot, is that even though he has his free heroic move, his free heroic might, I very often would be calling heroic moves with a different hero, just so in the combat phase I have more options with him to either use his free might for heroic combat or a free strike, and still keeping his might points there in case they're useful for something else. But like, I know that a lot of players just by default will always revert to Aragorn calling everything for as long as possible. Though I'm not sure that's necessarily correct. So yeah, the King of Men is probably is definitely one of the best heroes in the game. Yeah, any comments, everybody?
No, I like that. I know. Oh, sorry about that. I know you said you don't use might, and I like that idea too, because it kind of saves him. For many times you think you're going to throw Aragorn and he's going to magically roll a 6. Like I've seen him played with him where I've rolled really crap, or like I've played against him where he's rolled really crap, and my opponent always regrets spending his point of might on the move or the march, realizing, oh darn, like now I got to spend it, now I'm at 1 might. So yeah, I like that. I also like the ability of him as like an unlimited amount of captains in a way. So I know when I come against him, what I really hate is when I see Aragorn across the field and it's like each turn, heroic march, heroic march, heroic march. It's like, here he comes, and it's not even doing anything. It's just like a free 3 to 5 inches. So yeah, that's my only comment. I don't know though. I know I have. You said you'd have success with him. There's even a guy in the States, who's had success with him that usually tops the top 5 at many tournaments. And I just don't know if he's worth the points for myself and for most players, unless you really, really know how to play him. I'm not too sold on him. I don't know. What do you guys think?
That's just one of those very high point models. Very often they will not be worth their points. Like virtually no model over 200 points is worth their points, unless you're really able to pull off something big from him.
Now,
so I guess my thought on Aragorn is, he's a guy that I think you tend to see when you've got a Minas. He's a guy you see allied into something that is not a Minas Tirith list. Maybe with some Minas Tirith guys, or maybe not if it's all hero. And I think that's because the way he is set up, he doesn't particularly synergize with the Minas Tirith. I mean, there's nothing in his rules that is particular to Minas Tirith and makes Minas Tirith work better. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, he's 240 points that basically is a 6-inch banner and then stuff that benefits him, which means that you need to use him correctly, and you need a list where he can kind of come out and shine. And and his biggest weakness, of course, is he's got 3 will. And once those 3 will are gone, and if there's a caster around on the board, your 240 points diminishes to something approaching 0. And so he's a guy I think you fit into another list that gives you some way to protect him or make him less vulnerable to less vulnerable to casters, either because there's, it's an all hero list, so everybody's dangerous, or you've got, some sort of support for him. But I guess why that's, I think in a Minas Tirith context, he's not my favorite, even though he has some advantages. But he's a guy you need to play correctly, and he's a guy with a weakness that you need to figure out how to cover. Yeah,
from that sort of list, a particular thing, there is a guy who's done really well in GBHL, and also he, I think the current Polish national champion called Jakub Krochmal, and he played this really cool list last year at one of the GBHL tournaments, which had LSR, Galadriel, Lady of Light, Boromir of Gondor, Círdan, and then just some warriors of Minas Tirith and High Elves. And he basically just everything just synergized together so well. And Aragorn was unstoppable, Boromir was unstoppable, Galadriel was doing whatever she wanted, Círdan was helping everybody, and it's just kill it, win it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the type of list that he's best in. Is something that can, a list that can kind of cover his big weakness of will and allow him just to come out and shine.
See, I find with LSR personally, I agree, he becomes one of those Gil-galad kind of things where you just kind of look at him and you go, oh, well, unless I have something else to either protect him or help him, he's just going to get swarmed down. And I've wasted, more than likely, a quarter or more than a quarter of my points on a person who's just going to get shut down. Because let's be honest, you're using him at a higher points value games, so there's going to be more things that are going to stop him. But I like to use, I've used a list where it's Lady of Light with LSR, and it's like Madril and I think Damrod or something. You end up getting, I think, 38 models or something like that. And so you have an okay amount of models. Then you also have Lady of Light, which then protects LSR, and then LSR gets to kind of go crazy. But you still have enough might to kind of support LSR. But that's just kind of the list that I've kind of developed over trying to make him work. Because like I said, he's my favorite hero, and I always want to take him with Minas Tirith to try to make the most out of him. But I definitely think he needs something to help him.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the wrong way to play LSR, right? And the wrong way to play LSR is somebody takes a Lessar and then just a bunch of other guys. And you tend to see this at like 600 points, 700 points when somebody wants to play a Lessar. And you see a Lessar sitting on the table and then like one or two other small heroes because that's all they can afford. And then just, some guys to fill in the warband. And it runs into something with a ring wraith or a wizard and it dies horribly because a Lessar doesn't do anything and the rest of the army gets swamped. And that's kind of what you have to avoid when you're building a list around a Lessar is you have to really think, how am I going to deal with magic and who else can I throw in here to support him to make sure that he's earning his 240 points back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a key takeaway is many people build lists. They'll pick a hero and build it by adding warriors. I think anything with the LSR, you build around him heroes. And that's like things to counter magic. He also looks like he's a might kingpin, but in many ways he's not. So we talked about it earlier. He could blow his might in a bad duel roll. So make sure you're not just throwing him with one or two might heroes. Like he needs might to cover him, and he does need magic to cover him as well.
Yep. And there is, by the way, another guy in this list that you can buy and then just buy a bunch of warriors, and we'll talk to him when we get to. We'll talk about him when we get there. But there is, if that's what you want to do, there is a hero in this list that is designed for that.
Does he wear white?
He doesn't.
Speaking of,
he carries a white flag, though.
Speaking of someone who wears white, we're going to move on to the next hero, which is Gandalf himself, Gandalf the White. So I'll move that over to Matt.
All right, so Gandalf the White. Gandalf the White is newly buffed for this edition of the rules. He is a hero of valor, which means he can now lead Minas Tirith figures. He's moved 6, although he's going to be on Shadowfax all the time until he gets knocked off, so that's less important. He's still fight 5. He is strength 4, although that's going to get buffed, as we'll find out in a second. He is now defense 6, so he is the toughest among the wizards. He has 2 attacks, so he is the attackiest of the wizards. 3 wounds, courage 7, 3 might, 6 will plus his staff, and 3 fate. And for his war gear, he has a staff of power that gives him an additional free will a turn. He has Glamdring, which increases his strength to 5, in addition to being a hand and a half elven made sword. So he's winning tie die rolls on 3+. And he has Narya, which allows him to re-roll his fate. So he's really got somewhere around 4 or 5 fate. So he's got a lot of stats. And, and let me talk about Shadowfax, I guess. He can spend 20 points to get Shadowfax, which you will always do, which brings him to 240 points, which is the same as King Alessar. But that gives him move 12. Shadowfax is a defense 5 horse, so he's the equivalent of an armored horse. He also comes with 2 will that can be used by Gandalf to resist spells, and 1 fate, which can be useful to keep Shadowfax around a little longer. Before I talk about Gandalf's spells, I just want to talk about his stat line and make sure that people understand his stat line is actually, just when you look at the combat stats, getting away from his fate and his wounds and things like that, that's a like Huron the Tall type stat line. So he is actually a combat hero, of the second tier in and of himself. So he can do really as much damage as somebody like Huron the Tall. And he's obviously much more durable with 3 rerollable fate and a 3rd wound. So let's talk about, and his heroic actions, by the way, are heroic resolve, which you're probably not going to use very often, heroic channeling, which you probably will, and heroic strike. So with strike, he can also be a hero killer. So let's talk about his magical powers. He has a lot of spells. He has blinding light on a 2+. He has immobilize on a 2+. He has terrifying aura on a 2+. He has command on a 3+, fortify spirit on a 3+, strengthen will on a 3+, banishment on a 4+, sorceress blast on a 4+, and your staff is broken on a 4+. So he is an interesting combination. He's kind of the toolkit wizard. The other wizards in the game all kind of have a specialization. Sauron's a cannon because he has the he gets the extra reroll. He's got a 4+ sorceress blast, and he's got kind of the long range command and immobilize. Gandalf has that. He can't do it quite as well because he doesn't get the reroll, but he does have the sorceress blast, and he does have the reduced values for immobilize and command. He also combines that with a lot of what Galadriel, Lady of Light does. Although his stats for casting are 1 higher. So with Fortify Spirit, you have to be a little cagey about when you want to call a channeled Fortify Spirit with him, because if you're going to do that, you really have to throw 2 dice at it in order to make sure that it goes off. And his banishment with a 4+ is a little less reliable. So he's kind of a combination of Lady of Light and Saruman, with the caveat that he's second to both of them in what they do, but he combines the ability to do both. And I think that's really the secret to Gandalf and why he's useful is, he's a lot of points. He's 240 points if you throw in Shadowfax. But when you throw him into a list, he's going to be useful, as opposed to Galadriel, Lady of Light, who could run into a bunch of dwarves, and then she's just a fight 6, 3 attack hero with defense. She defense 3 or defense 4 with a really low defense. Gandalf's always got something to do, and the problem is he has so many different things he can do. He can't do them all at once. So you really need to think through ahead of time. All right, if this is the type of army I'm going to fight, these are the things I need to do with Gandalf, and this is the order of operations that I need to do them in. So because and you also have to think, which spells am I going to spend a might to channel? Because there's 3, there's 3 useful ones in there to kind of prep him. And you need to go, all right, if there's going to be a lot of shooting, I need to channel Blinding Light. If I'm hitting up against a horde army that doesn't have a lot of shooting, I'm going to channel Terrifying Aura. If I'm going to be hitting a bunch of magic, I'm going to channel Fortify Spirit, and I'm going to cast it on myself. So I become this, fortress of will that can't be counterspelled. And you also want to kind of put him in an army, and I think Minas Tirith is a good army for this, where you don't have to pitch him in and get him involved for a couple turns. Because ideally what you want to do is you want to get Blinding Light up, you want to get Terrifying Aura up, and you want to get Fortify Spirit on a couple of your heroes. And that's going to take 3 or 4 turns to do. So if you've got an army that can kind of sit behind a shield wall and shoot while Gandalf's kind of getting everything ready, that's really the way to use him. But he's a hero that you need to really think about to try and get the most out of. But I got to say, he has won me a lot of games, just because if you're going to come into a game or a tournament where you don't know what you're going to be hitting, you could be running into a Balrog, you could be running into a couple of Mumax, you could be running into a Great Beast, you could be running into a bunch of the new Nazgul Ringwraiths, and you just don't know what you're hitting. Gandalf's the guy to have in your list, because he always has a counter to whatever the other guy is throwing at you. You may have to think really hard in order to get it, but that's what he gives you for his 240 points.
Now, I know that with, I think a majority of people would agree with this, that if you're able to get a wizard into your list, you try to do that. But weirdly enough, Gandalf seems to be one of the wizards who a lot of people struggle, and it's mostly due to his points, of course. But why do you think that people choose other heroes over Gandalf if wizards are such a huge thing in the game?
So, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, I was going to say my answer to this question is because he's 240 points.
Mhm.
And if you don't really know how to use magic well and use him well and know when it's the time for him to stop being the wizard who's hanging back and casting command and start to be here in the tall and going in and start cutting people to pieces. That's really the tricky bit with Gandalf, is knowing kind of when it is to use stuff and where to position him on the battlefield that he's not going to get kind of surprised and taken out. Because if he gets kind of committed to battle too early, you lose a lot of the points value from his spells. And you really need to kind of be using Gandalf the White in the first part of the game to neutralize the enemy's heroes and big hitters. And once he's done that, and once they're out of the game, that's when he plunges in and starts swinging Glamdring around.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing that last time I played Gandalf the White was just before the pandemic, and what I found generally was that in one of the games I was playing against Sauron, and he did extremely well. It was basically 45 spirit myself, and then Sauron can't really do anything. Sauron just gets sorcerers blasted every turn and ends up on the floor. And so Sauron was really struggling, and I was able to basically kill the army around him and then kill Sauron in the end. But then another game where my opponent had a mortar army with just minor heroes like Goroths and all those little things. And I was like, okay, well, this is a 240 point model. And really, yeah, it can't really do enough on his own if you're really outnumbered and there are too many threats. So it's pretty much the same thing with any wizard. You either beat them by not having any, by either having too many big things for them to control or not having any. And so, in situations where when your opponent is really relying on like one or two big characters, then Gandalf's great. In situations where they have more or are not really relying on any and just have a horde, then Gandalf essentially ends up just being like a glorified Huron who might also cast a spell.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The one advantage Gandalf has over Huron in a horde situation is, that's the classic thing where the first thing he does is he casts Channel Terrifying Aura on himself.
Yeah.
And then he starts killing heroes. Because he's actually really, if what you're fighting is a bunch of fight 4 or even fight 5 heroes, because he's got Glamdring, he casts Channel Terrifying Aura on himself, and then he's got his 12-inch move, and he just charges 1, and he can generally with strength 5, if it's, I'm assuming it's a foot hero. If he's not a foot hero, you Sorceress Blast him first and then charge him. And he actually is a really good kind of captain assassin, because he can go in, knock a guy down, and just flash kill heroes one at a time, and it's a useful thing for him to do.
Another huge thing about Gandalf as well is the fact that he does have an elven blade, so when he strikes, it's a big deal. So even if you try to, if you were to charge him into a big hero, that elven blade, even though he's fight 5 and not fight 6 like everybody would prefer, it's going to make a huge difference in a lot of games if he charges like a big hero and he has that elven blade.
Yeah. And he has strength 5 too. So if he hits somebody, he's wounding on 5s. And even a defense 7 hero on the other side, especially if he's on foot, if once he's knocked down, you're getting 6 attacks needing 5s. You're probably going to take out a hero that way.
Not to mention, if you happen to overnumber that model, you can go two-handed with him, and he's strength 5 plus 1 to wound, and you'd have 6 attacks to win that more than likely.
Yep, it's true as well.
Any final thoughts on Gandalf?
Yeah, I think the one way to fight Gandalf is to jump on him as quick as possible, because Matt hit all the points with all the tools that he grants. But I think when I played against him before, my big thing is I just hit him really hard aggressively as fast as possible, so he can't get off the terrifying spells, so he can't do as many things. But he's a really, really good model, and I I'm surprised competitive players don't use him as much, but I'm not surprised that he isn't used as much as he is, because you make one or two mistakes. It's kind of like you use him like an Aragorn in combat when Matt said he's a hurt Huron and he doesn't do too well, or you don't maximize his combat. You treat him as a caster the whole game. So there's a lot of variables in there. You have to get the best out of him, which is pretty hard to do.
Yeah, he's tricky to build. The other way to kind of take down Gandalf, by the way, is multiple casters, because at the end of the day, he's got all the right spells, but there is only one of them. And he can get saturated, basically. He's kind of tricky to build a list around. If you're going Gandalf the white and you're trying to use him at like lower points levels, it's really Gandalf and a couple of like smaller heroes and some guys, which works. At higher points levels, then you got to decide, is it Gandalf and some mid-level heroes like a Faramir and a Huron and some other ones, or do you try? I've actually had a lot of success with Gandalf and Boromir together, which together suck up a tremendous amount of points. But then you just bulk out their war bands, and between the two of them, Gandalf fortifies Boromir, so Boromir kind of becomes unstoppable. And between the two of them, they can do a lot of damage. That's another way to do it, is Gandalf and another big hero, and make sure you have enough tough guys that just aren't going to die long enough for those two heroes to do some damage.
Okay. Before we move into Denethor, quick question. If you're making a Minas Tirith list, do you take Elisar or Gandalf the White?
It's actually an interesting question.
You take Boromir.
Yeah.
No, okay. Well, we're assuming that you're going to have to, because they're the exact same points. Which of the two would you pick?
So here's the interesting question, right? Assume you only have 240 points. Which one do you pick? I think there's an obvious answer here, and that's you take Gandalf. Gandalf wins that fight, hands down. So then it's kind of interesting when you think about, how you pit them against each other in a, when you start adding stuff on. I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't really think about is, if you just pitted Gandalf against the Lesser, Gandalf's going to win. Mm-hmm. And because Gandalf will shut down a Lesser and then kill him. Mm-hmm. I don't quite know how that scales up when you're trying to put different stuff around the two of them.
So Matt's going to say Gandalf. Mick, what are you saying?
I would say Aragorn, just because even if Gandalf transfixes Aragorn and burns all of his will and all that, Gandalf's eventually going to lose a heroic move and is going to get charged by an untransfixed Aragorn and then going to get slaughtered.
Okay, Rainier, decider, Aragorn or Gandalf?
It's Boromir,
I'm cut, to be honest, but I would say Boromir. No, I'm going to say Denethor instead, actually. No, I think for me, the only reason I'm going to lean toward Aragorn is because Gandalf, I think, has a better opportunity to do more in a 6-game or 5-game or even 3-game tournament. But Gandalf requires so much finesse and so much experience to play him. And for that reason, I'd lean to Aragorn, because Aragorn's mistakes will be a little less detrimental during the game. Whereas, it's easier for Aragorn to heroic combat through something or kill a mega hero or crunch through a whole bunch of fight 5 or even fight 6 heroes. But Gandalf, you have to play it so well in order to do something like that. So I'm going to go Aragorn.
Okay.
But just because of that reason.
All right. Now we're going to move on to Denethor, where I'll move it over to Rainier.
Okay, so I was tasked with talking about the dysfunctional family of Middle-earth. Let's start with Papa. So Denethor is Fight 5, Strength 4, D5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, Courage 5. He has 0 might, 3 will, and 0 fate. He's a hero of valor at 35 points, which is pretty good if you want to go horde. But there's a kicker. Unless he's in the same army as Aragorn or Lesar, then he has to be your leader. By his stats. Like, that's not quite good. So he's got a couple special rules. Broken Mind is one of them. Before priority is rolled, you have to take a courage test with him. It works in a way where if you lose, the enemy basically gets to control him, attack your own guys, move him, do whatever they want with him. But they cannot target him if they do control him in strikes or shooting. If you pass the courage test, it's fine. He also, if Boromir is on the board, which you'll probably want to take Boromir in any Gondor list, he automatically passes courage tests. And yeah, if Boromir is slain, the opponent gets to automatically use him on the next turn. So he's kind of a weird model. I know based on time, I'm going to just cut through him really fast. I like him a lot, actually, to be honest. I've talked a lot in this podcast about the benefit of low-cost Fight 5 models, and I think he fits that profile perfectly. He's got 2 attacks at Strength 4 with Fight 5, and the Minas Tirith army bonus is an extra courage. So right off the bat, he's courage 6 with 3 will. So he's not. I've never really seen him fail that many courage tests. And worst comes to shove, you're going to keep him in the back of your army line. He'll kill like maybe 1 or 2 Minas Tirith soldiers. But yeah, he's not bad. I'd of course accompany him with either Aragorn or Boromir, but as a troop bulker, he's really good. And even in scenarios like Fog of War, where leader points don't count, like you can throw this guy in like a cannonball, and he's ripped through quite a lot. Because Gondor usually bring a banner too, so he's got 3/5 Fight 5 attacks. So he's pretty good. He's a sleeper in my opinion. One of a really rare model that I like using.
Now this one seems to be a controversial model because some people will say that they'll take him all the time. Some people say they don't. Are you guys taking him in a lot of lists, or is it a situational kind of thing when you put him in?
So I don't know. I'm in the camp of I don't take him. I think Denethor is a model that's kind of been overcome by this version of the rules. I mean, the reason you used to take Denethor was he was a cheap way to get 12 more Minas Tirith figures into the list. And you don't need to do that anymore because Aragorn can take 18, Gandalf can take 15, Boromir can take 15. And, he is a Fight 5 2-attack hero for 35 points, but he has no might, which is a real problem. And a lot of the time, he's a Fight 5 hero that you can't risk putting anywhere near the front lines because he's a Fight 5 0 might, 0 fate hero. And he's only got 2 wounds. So he's squishy, and he's your army general most of the time. So for me at least, he struggles to have a role because I'd rather commit that 35 points to getting one of the other new, kind of captain level heroes that Minas Tirith has plenty of that are almost as cheap, can bring enough guys to the table to make them worth it, and bring 3 might to the table. I mean, one thing I'll also say is, anybody here raise their hand if they have ever seen Denethor fail his Broken Mind roll? All right, well, you're the exception that proves the rule, Tim. Was that new edition or old edition?
Old edition. I failed it 3 times in the game.
Yeah, so I think with new edition,
that's you, Tim. You always roll really bad.
Yeah, with new edition with 3 will and a +1 courage, it almost never happens. So I think that's something you don't really need to be afraid of. It's more just a question of, do I want to spend 35 points plus whatever number of points you're going to fill his warband out with, and not have any might to, make them move and do the things that they need to.
See, I like him at a lower point list. Mm-hmm. And I say this because I tried him out for the first time at a event that I co-hosted, and I was the ringer for it. So I wanted to just bring a non-competitive list with basic troops, and I just hoarded him out with some of the new named Gondor heroes like Hurin, Irolis, and stuff like that. and I was just shocked. Like I had to hold back because he would go ham, and even if he would die, you have Huron who negates the VP points for the leader and stuff like that.
Well, remember, it's only the VP point for killing him. And most of the scenarios you get VP points for wounding him, and you still get that penalty. So, like, you're still going to lose the point in domination if Denethor gets wounded.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I don't know. I like him. I like not him so much as a model, but what the play style that he brings, because you can hoard out a ton of D7 troops, even D6 lanced horses with him, and it's just very interesting coming across like a 50-60 model D7 block and being like, what the heck, what is this? And it's just Gondorian soldiers and Fountain Court Guard, and you're like, what do I even focus on? And then you have Denethor there, like, what's up? I'm actually fight 5, and it's just not a fun day. So I don't know.
Well, it's a good point, though.
Also good for people with daddy issues.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I actually play him because I have daddy issues. So my therapist.
You sit there with your little bowl of cherry tomatoes at the table and just chewing on them.
Some chicken. I'm
the
breaking
juice
the
runs
chicken
down
and
your
stuff.
chin.
Yeah, I got a random little kid singing "Home is behind the wood."
You hire him for
opponent's
the
just
hour.
like, what is going on here? Like, they're like, what is this?
I mean, the classic Denethor player, right, is the guy that's always like eating the fried chicken at the table, and you're like, no, dude, don't touch my figures. That's all right, I got it. I'll move.
Yeah, exactly. Fried chicken and a beer, like that's the Denethor player.
But
and everyone watching this who has been at a tournament, you've played that guy.
They bring their own chalice from home just so they have specifically that. They won't accept your cups. They have
my chalice.
But it's an interesting point, though, that what Rainier brings up, which is this army has a lot of really cheap heroes that allow you to take more troops. So it's kind of, it's kind of one of their staples almost, which is, hey, we have these huge heroes, we have these medium tier heroes, and we have these really small heroes. And Denethor is the exception where he goes, you know what? If you have Aragorn on my list, you might as well throw me in, because then you get an extra, 3 troops to what a normal captain would be at 15 to 25 points cheaper.
Except you probably want to bring a captain or an enemy hero just to have those extra might points.
Yeah, have the might.
Because Aragorn will need that.
Yeah, you always want the might, and I mean that was kind of my point about this is. That used to be a way to build an army with Minas Tirith, and I just don't think that it is the way to build an army with Minas Tirith anymore. Because I never find myself going, oh shoot, I need another hero because I need to put more figures on the table. I've always got enough slots. It's just a matter of, getting enough figures to fill them now.
Okay, so general consensus seems to say that. Not a huge fan of him, but he has his place, I think, in certain systems if you were to use him. But mostly it seems like people are not a huge fan on this podcast, at least. Now we're going to move into the greatest hero in Middle-earth himself. And I can't wait for Matt to talk about him because I am very interested to see what he has to say about this. And
Peregrine Took, Guard of the Citadel. Okay, for 25 points, you get a figure with move 4, fight 3, shoot 3+, and he can throw stones. So there is a use for that. Strength 2, defense 4, attack 1, 1 wound, courage 4, 1 might, 1 will, 2 fate. He has armor and a dagger. He can call heroic defense. And if you want to spend an additional 5 points on him, you can get an elven cloak. So Pippin in this list is a figure that is struggling for a role. I think we've talked about him before. The only conceivable role you could get for him is if you get him the elven cloak and you just want one random guy, both to be a warband drop, and just to go and sit on an objective and hide behind a tree and not be seen for the whole game. but 30 points is a lot of points to spend for that. So I'm not sure why you use Pippin. I think what you do is you find 5 points someplace else, and instead of Pippin, you get, I guess, Mablung, which is that one hero that counts as being an Elven Cloak and can give an Elven Cloak to everybody within 6 inches of him, and you have him go sit on the objective, and then he can shoot with impunity from behind it. I think he's your better bet for that role, if indeed that is a role you ever want to fulfill in this army, as opposed to just taking a Guard of the Fountain Court or just random warrior with bow to run behind a tree and sit on the objective.
So besides what Matt's saying, can you guys think of another competitive use for him, or is he just simply for show?
I think, in summary, I think everyone will agree with me. He's like that thing that you appreciate it for being on the menu, but you would never order it. So that's Pippin to me. When I see him, I'm like, oh, cool model. I appreciate it. Thank you for being so diverse with your menu selection, but I'm not going to order that. So I think that sums it up. It's just 30 points for leading 6 guys, and he can't really do anything but throw a stone.
Actually, he can't lead 6 guys. He's an independent hero.
He's independent.
Oh shoot! Well, it gets worse and worse each time I open my mouth. So yeah.
If he was like 15, then I'd say sure, take him over Fountain Guard.
Yeah.
Like if let's say he's 10, then he's an auto include because of the 3 mic points essentially for 10 points. But if he was like 15, then I think he'd be cool to just have in a Minas Tirith army.
Yeah.
It would just be like a very cool like thematic thing. Oh yeah, Pippin goes into every Minas Tirith army just because he does.
Yeah, it'd be like Fatty Bulger. You just add him because it's cool. You just have that nice hero.
Or if he had that add-on rule for Gandalf the White, which we have the figure for now. I mean, that would be. I mean, even if all he did was like ride around on Shadowfax with Gandalf and make Gandalf resistant to magic, I think that would be, that would be worth it. And he'd have a role.
This might seem a little bit. I don't know, but I would like to see something like this, where like for every kill he gets, you can like increase 1 statistic of his stat line. So like at the beginning, he's only strength 2, fight 3. If you get a kill, maybe you boost his fight value to 4. You go to his attacks to 2 or something like that.
You go against Goblin Town. You go against Goblin Town, and by the end, it's like a little boar.
Fair enough. I just want to fight with Pippin, okay? I just want to fight with Pippin.
Frodo,
he gets 10 kills and he gets the Mighty Hero special rule.
Yeah, exactly. He gets 15 kills. He can cast Chill Soul.
Yeah, that's right. 5 kills and he gets Harbinger of Evil.
Oh my gosh.
He's really upset that Mary killed the Witch King, so he's trying to make up for him in his own way.
Yeah, that still only counts as 1 rule between Mary and Pippin.
Like even something like to do with Denethor, supporting Denethor or singing a song for Denethor. If he's within 6 inches of Denethor, give him +1 courage or something like that.
That'd be interesting. Okay, now based on what I'm hearing earlier in the episode, this seems to be a very favorite of everybody's. We're going to move over to Rainier again for Boromir, Captain of the White Tower.
Okay, so Boromir, the big boy, in my opinion, probably most of you guys, I would say he's the number 1 pick for any hero in a Minas Tirith list. And I'd say that too if you ally even Minas Tirith with Fiefdins or Rohan. Boromir is the guy. He's 160 base. You'll probably, in my opinion, I don't know, you might bring the banner, maybe not. But fully
and by maybe not, he means definitely bring the banner.
Okay,
yeah,
so
I'm being political about it.
We'll definitely get into this because I definitely want to talk about the banner. But Rainier, go ahead.
Okay, so you definitely have to bring the banner for a few reasons. Wait, is the banner a lance also?
No, you cannot take the lance and the banner, I believe.
Okay, so I see.
But
so
you would think he could just stab with the banner. Yeah, you would think that'd be okay.
Yeah, so banner's 40 points. That puts it at 200. Horse is 10, 210, and a shield 215. Yeah, he's pretty good. Fight 6. Banner makes him fight 7 and makes any model within 6 inches of him +1 to fight. It's any Gondor warrior, right, guys?
It specifically says all friendly Gondor warrior models within 6 inches.
So your Fountain Court turn to fight 5. Your regular warriors go to fight 4. He goes to fight 7. It affects him, right?
It does, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So on top of getting a 6-inch banner reroll with D7 elves, basically, who have bodyguard. So he's a beast. Strength 4, D7 with the shield, 3 attacks through wounds, courage 6, courage 7 with the army bonus, 6 might, 3 will, 3 fate. The 3 fate's the big thing because this is the part of the movie and the books where he did not die. Banner of Minas Tirith I went through. He has strike, strength, and heroic defense. Heroic defense, in my opinion, is a sleeper because you might want to use it in certain situations. He's a hero of valor, so he's not always going to be your leader if you pick a hero of legend. And yeah, he's got the Horn of Gondor, which we've probably gone through before. If he's outnumbered in a fight, he can blow it. If they fail their courage test, he automatically wins the combat. But yeah, he's a beast, to be honest. I even prefer him as a combat hero over Aragorn. The 6 might is a lot better, in my opinion, than 3+1 might that Aragorn has. Boromir can ram through anything. He can heroic combat through captains, through fight 5 or even fight 6 heroes, because he has all that might built up that if you get the knockdown on the charge, I'll just kill you. So I think he's a total beast. My one gripe with him is his horse, and he's not a horse lord. So I know at least in the States, many people bring Boromir at different points levels. And if you have a shooting army or monsters or even magic, his horse, you just take out his horse as fast as possible, and it takes his threat level from, I'd say, 100 to 33%. But yeah, I don't want to spoil anything else. What do you guys have to say about him before he's besides he's an absolute beast?
Oh, he's probably a must pick for Minas Tirith. I mean, that's all the rest.
Yeah, I mean he's the guy I was talking about earlier. If you're gonna just take one big hero and then kind of surround him with warriors, he's the guy to take. And it's because of the banner and the fact that he can turn those fight 4 rangers into, fight 5 elves within 6 inches of him, and give him a banner within 6 inches of him. He's the one that, whatever damage he does is almost icing on the cake to what he does for the rest of the army, which is, I think, one of the reasons why, he's 25 points cheaper than Alessar. And, even if he's been shut down because you've burned through his will, he still is useful because he can just sit there and the rest of the army, gets buffed around him, and the rest of the army can do the killing around him. Even if he just sits there with the banner. I mean, that and the combination of the, now that because he didn't, if I'm remembering correctly, he didn't used to he didn't get the +1 fight value to himself, I think maybe in the old edition, but whatever it used to be, the fact that he goes up to fight 7 is like the magical level now, where, he can go into a fight 6 hero and he doesn't need to spend the might to strike. So once those other fight 6 heroes have kind of run out of the might to strike up against him, he can just come in and just beat them.
Yeah, but surely you would have to use the might to counter because you don't want to lose your horse.
If they still have it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if the heroes come in and they spent maybe a might to strike before against somebody, or a might to call a heroic combat, or a might to call a heroic move, and they come into them and they spend 1 might point to strike up, say he counters it or survives, and then then he's at a might and Boromir's at fight 7.
Mm-hmm.
So Boromir then wins from there on out.
Mm-hmm.
And it really makes his 6 points of might last that much longer.
All right. So I guess we'll go into, and I know that's probably going to go one way, but I'll just ask everyone anyway. Now it's the banner seems to be the general consensus, but is there a reason you would take him without the banner, and you would just take him at 180 points with lance, shield, and horse?
No.
Yes.
Oh, you can. I mean, he's still a beast, but he's a beast without the banner. He's a beast who buffs your whole army and makes not just his space a threat, but he makes the whole area a threat in a way. And I think that's why I'd say no, just because you can't, like Mick said, you can. I think he's still going to be really good because you throw a lance on there and all of a sudden he's like a Mahood king with 6 might and just like tearing through it, everything. But I think the banner is just such a buff for Minas Tirith because it just takes a horde defense 7 or 6 army or even rangers. It can turn a ranger at 8 points into a fight 5 elf. Like it's just for what it gets, even at 40 points. Like I just think it's too good to give up.
Yeah, the reason you don't take him. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Generally, I fully agree. And the fact that the banner used to be 50 points. So there used to be a time when Boromir was like 180 plus a banner, and he was getting too excessive. And I don't think he was giving the fight value bonus back in the day. But the fact that it's 40 points, essentially, you always want to take you always want to bring a banner in your army anyway. And so this is really only a 15-point upgrade for the banner that you're gonna have regardless. So that's like a big benefit of it. Obviously, the downside is that no other hero can pick it up. Well, in fact, no other model can pick it up because only warriors can pick up other warriors' banners. So it's possible that if you run into trouble, you might be losing both your general and the banner. So there is always that issue that you have to think of and slightly worry about. But because of how good he is, that's rarely going to happen anyway. I mean,
Yeah,
there is potentially a situation where you wouldn't take a banner, you would just take a lance and like play a more hero heavy list. But if you're just going for any average Minas Tirith list, you're always just go with banner.
Yeah, if you're not going to take him with the banner, you pay 60 points less and you get the other Boromir.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
basically,
exactly.
you're paying. You lose if you do the math. My son actually pointed this out to me the other day. If you do the math, you're paying 60 points without the banner. You're paying 60 points to get a lance, 2 points of will and 3 points of fate, which ought to cost 30 points. So you're paying a 30-point premium if you're taking Boromir, Captain of the White Tower, without the banner.
Yes, but you can also he's also a hero of Balor who can actually bring troops. So
right,
either way, you'd be paying for a hero of some sort to bring troops if you wanted to bring troops.
So spend the 60 points on another hero and bring troops.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to another hero who has daddy issues, so I'll move him on to the daddy issue guy, Rainier.
Okay, so I've got My Daddy Hates Me, Faramir. I'm going to be talking about Faramir is a hero of valor as well. He's fight 5, strength 4, d5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 6, courage 7 with the army bonus, 3 might, 3 will, 2 fate. He has quite a lot of options: armored horse, bow, heavy armor, lance, and shield. His actions are resolve, accuracy, strike, and defense. Let's see, and he has he's woodland creature as well, which is a big deal. And he's a special rule: if Denethor is part of any Faramir, then Faramir will automatically pass courage test if he's forced to make. However, if Denethor is on the battlefield, Faramir must always charge an enemy model if he is able to do so. So that goes on to like how he is trying to prove his worth to his dad. I like him. When I usually see him at tournaments or events, he's treated as kind of like a mid to high tier hero. He's usually on a horse with a lance and heavy armor. I don't know if you guys would build him different. I know in the new Rangers Legion, which we'll probably touch on, he's quite good complement on foot in that list. But yeah, I like him a lot. You can play him like a Huron, where he hits flanks, can possibly heroic strike up to fight another mega hero or something. But his real worth, I think that's kind of overlooked, is his heroic actions. Heroic resolve. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I like it with all this magic that's popping up. Heroic defense also, if he's your hero, you can have him call heroic defense so he doesn't, or if he's your leader so he doesn't die. And heroic accuracy, those are the three that pop up. So he's going to make your Gondor or even possibly your fiefdom shooting quite strong. So yeah, I think he's good. His base with just base with a sword is 80 points, so he does kind of go a little higher. If you build him to be combat-y, he's gonna touch around Eomer's points, which I don't know if I'd like. But yeah, what do you guys think about him?
I think actually the fact that he can bring a horse even in the Rangers of Ithilien force kind of makes me think that you basically always put him on a horse anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So okay. I think Faramir gets some mixed reviews. Do you find him worth taking, or is it only because I think a lot of people take him at smaller points because he has a really good stat line for smaller point games? Would you take him at higher points?
Well, the issue he's got is that he's not number 2 in a Minas Tirith list. Normally, let's say if your number 1 is a Boromir with a flag, then your number 2 is usually going to be someone like Madril, who might have, let's say, some cool special rule, or maybe a Huron just for the bonus of +1 to wounds, or maybe a Kyrian, or someone else to bring more troops, but who is cheaper. So Faramir just doesn't really sit as like number 2 or number 3 within Minas Tirith. So I always find it very difficult to be able to find a slot for him. Really, it's almost like, yeah, if I could take 5 heroes within Minas Tirith, then he would probably be one of them. But this always seems to be better choices for like your toolbox of heroes within the whole list.
So Faramir sits in the same tier as Huron does. And I think a lot of people tend to go for Huron because he's slightly cheaper, can get the +1 to wound all the time rather than just on the charge, assuming you're getting Faramir with the lance. But you know, the downside of Huron is he's a lot squishier than Faramir is. Faramir, if he's completely bulked out, is defense 7 as opposed to defense 6. And that's a big difference because that means heroes are wounding you on 6s rather than 5s. And Faramir's got 2 more will and 1 more fate than Huron does. So I think at lower points levels, you know, Faramir's the guy you want to lead your army. I think the other use for Faramir is the time you would want to use him as a second hero is if you're playing Gandalf, right? And you don't have enough points to get Gandalf Boromir. I think the next guy that you go to is Faramir because you want somebody who's a little more of a robust killer than Huron is. And Faramir is more robust than Huron is. The time not to take Faramir, by the way, is when you have Denethor because of the special rule that now Faramir has to charge if Denethor is in the list, and that's a real big problem. You basically have to devote guys to like holding Faramir back until the right time to charge, and then oh, by the way, you have to call the heroic move, and you can't because Faramir's behind 3 other guys. So that's the time when you definitely take Huron over Faramir is if you've got Denethor on the list. But I think if the second tier hero is going to be your army leader, you want Faramir, or if you know your number 1 primary hitter is going to be somebody like Gandalf, I think Faramir's the guy to back him up rather than Huron.
I think another benefit is he's a hero of valor as well, so he can lead a few extra troops.
So is Huron.
Oh, is he? Oh, I apologize. Yeah. I don't. The thing with Faramir is, he is a I mean, like Rainier said with the bonus, he's the same courage as wizards. He is a phenomenal stay on the battlefield kind of hero, charge anything kind of hero. And with the 3 might, he has heroic strike, which is what you're looking for. Yes, he only has 2 attacks, but if you get him on a horse, he's 3 attacks, and more likely you're taking a lance, so he's +1 to wound. I don't know. I think he gets a little underrated, but I understand based on the army that he's in that he doesn't get the love he deserves because of all the other profiles. But I think at lower points, he is a phenomenal hero.
That's the thing. Like if he was part of an army like elves, like Rivendell or Lothlorien, or like virtually most other lists, then you would expect to see him. But here you just have so many choices in Minas Tirith, then that very often there's just a better choice as number 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Do you keep him cheap at let's say 85 points with a bow?
Yeah, if you take Cringe of Athelion, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you'd only use, okay, fair enough. Any other final thoughts on Faramir? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, which is Barragond.
You should really talk to his dad, I think.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so Barragond, Guard of the Citadel, who is a minor hero, move 6, fight 4, strength 3, defense 6, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 4, 1 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He comes with a heavy armor sword and a longbow. His heroic action is heroic accuracy, and you can buy him a horse for 5 points. So this is another guy who I think has been somewhat overtaken by the new version of the rule. He used to be an auto include in every Minas Tirith Horde list because he was a way you could spend. I think I can't remember. His points have changed somewhat, but you could.
Yeah.
25. Yeah. So you used to be able to spend, I think, 30 points to put him on a horse and have him lead a dozen guys. And now he's a minor hero. He can only lead 6. You have, because of the heroic tiers here, you have less of a need for packing more guys in. He's still a decent spend at 35 points to get kind of a mounted archer on with a longbow on a horse, who also has the bodyguard special rule, which is, I guess, something I failed to mention, but that's one of his big draws is he's a bodyguard hero. So as long as the hero he's bodyguarding is still around, not only is he going to pass courage, but in the end game, he's going to automatically make his stand fast. And that's a useful trick to have around. So he has a use, but I don't think he's an auto include anymore in this list. He's something where, you got a few points left over and you can only get a cheap hero, so you spend it on him.
Now, do you guys feel?
I pretty much fully agree.
You guys kind of feel that he is one of those heroes where if you have, let's say, 100 points left or 70 points left and you're trying to fit more troops and you just add him there, or does he have another role for you guys?
I think he's the better version of Pippin is how I kind of view him. Without, I know the Gondor at War book kind of gave more options, but I think pre-Gondor at War, he was a good take just because he gives heroic accuracy. He gives more troops, more war bands too. I know we sometimes talk on this podcast about war bands, having more war bands, which help in deployment. But yeah, I don't know if I consider him competitive nowadays. He's a better version of Pippin and a slightly better version, in my opinion, of Damrod, unless you're taking Damrod in the Rangers Athelion list. But I like him. I mean, you put him on horse, he's only 35 points. He's decent. I don't know, though, if I'd say he's significant.
Okay.
I mean, the whole thing with he has a bodyguard special rule. So if you have spare points for like if let's say you have like extra 30 points or something like that, then he might just come in handy to give you a free stand fast towards the end game, because he will always pass if your general's around.
All right. Yeah, I think it's pretty much simple with Barragond. I think those are pretty much all the main talking points of him. He has some uses, but very niche situations with him. Now we're going to go into a model which I personally believe is an auto-include in almost any list I ever make with a Minas Tirith, which is Madril. So I'll move that over to Rainier.
Yeah, I agree with you. We'll touch on that. But Madrigal Captain Athelion is 55 points. He's fight 4. He's basically got the basic ranger profile: fight 4, shoot on a 3, strength 4, defense 5, 2/4. He has 3 might, which is good, and then he's 1 fate, 1 will. The big thing is he has heroic accuracy and heroic march. Those 2 things at a 55-point model with 3 might is really, really good. But I think what Tim was alluding to, and what we're all thinking, is his special rule, and that is Master of Ambush. So in scenarios where your forces need to arrive, like Reconnoiter or such, you may modify the reinforcements for Madril's dice roll for his warband for 1 or 2. If he's already on the board, you can do 1 or 2 for other warbands as well. So that, in a sense, gives Madril not only a buff to the whole army when it comes to deployment, but also a buff to his warband. He can march to get into places and whatnot. Yeah, he's an auto-occlude, I think, in my opinion, even over Faramir. He's the most important, I would say, ranger model outside of the rangers list that you'd bring in a Gondor list.
Did you just say that he can modify by 1 or 2?
No, by 1 either way. Sorry about that.
Either way, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a +1 or -1. So
Yeah.
if you had a 3, you could go to a 4 or a 2.
Yeah,
And
or if
that
you have a
even-
2, you can actually go down to a 1, which
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which I think is
yeah.
much
Okay,
more
well, I was
likely.
I understand that if you, I was just using an example. I understand that you would never do that.
But that even applies to those scenarios where you see if you're on the first half of your side of the board or the second half within 12 inches. So I know you want to shoot with Gondor Rangers. You can even apply that to make sure your whole army is on
that's
the
only
back.
for reinforcements.
Let me see. Are you sure?
Yeah,
No, it's for whenever you use
Yeah, it
the
says
reinforcements.
modify the
It's-
reinforcements.
It does work for Reconnoiter.
Sure, sorry about that.
It does
Yeah.
work
Also,
for Reconnoiter, by the
it's
way, though. You're more
Yeah,
likely to get on
yeah.
Reconnoiter.
That's true. And there's a very specific distinction between him and Guritz, in that he can only bring apply this bonus to warbands from this specific army list, whilst Guritz actually applies it to everybody in the army. So he's a mortar guy.
Yeah, so he's really good when you take specifically all Minas Tirith in a scenario that involves reinforcements. But I think.
So that modifies what I said
Right.
about the list earlier on in the scenario. So everybody forget what I just said. Tim, why don't you edit that out? About bringing Madrigal into that list. Never mind.
Okay. Yeah. But also he complements everything that we talked about when it comes to Boromir, Aragorn, and Gandalf. He's one of those heroes that 55 points for 3 might with a heroic march. You're not having to march with Aragorn, or you're not having to march with these certain big hero models, or even use their might on certain things. So he's really good. I like him a lot.
Do you guys feel that he is an auto-include in a Minas Tirith list, or do you think differently?
Yes.
No.
Ooh, controversy. Okay. Okay.
So I think he used to be an auto-include in the army list until Gondor War. And I think now the question in my mind is between him and Irolas, and we can talk a bit about that when we get to Irolas, because there were 2 reasons for including Madril in an army list. One is the Master of Ambush special rule. The other is the fact that he's a guy he's a 3 might hero that can get heroic march for a cheap amount of points. So you didn't need to throw random captain into a Minas Tirith list. Irolas also has heroic march now. He's 10 points more, but he comes with a bunch of other buffs that I think are useful in certain types of lists. And Minas Tirith is actually one of those lists that really isn't all that scared of being separated in a maelstrom of battle, because you can construct each warband as its own kind of self-sufficient little battle group, with some guys with shields in the front and some fight for guys with spears and bows in the back. So I think, I don't think Madril is necessarily somebody you want to include just to get the Master of Ambush. I think there are circumstances when you're better off going with Irolas, which is not to say that Madril isn't a good choice in a lot of situations, but I don't think he is a must include anymore now that Irolas exists.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. And he just, and I think when we say like a must include, it's more, I mean, he buffs the might game, the heroic moves, the heroic march, the deployment, and even the shooting. I think just at 55 points, that's just so beautiful.
I would also add that if you compare him to Irolas, I find heroic accuracy is generally more useful than heroic defense when you have your big horde army, because you will end up having, let's say, 10, 15 bows, and there will be situations where it's actually really nice to be able to shoot through 5 ranks and take off a horse.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I'll save my rebuttal to when we talk about Irolas.
So I think,
Matt, would you at least accept that he's a very good profile?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I take him a lot, and I recommend taking him a lot. I just don't. I think you can build a Minas Tirith army without him that is successful, and
I'm sure you can.
There's certain build outs of a Minas Tirith army that Madril's not going to add a lot to.
Okay, so he's a very good model. We'll hear later on what Matt thinks of Irolas over him, but we, as a general consensus, he's a very, very good model to include in your army. Next one on the list is Damrot, so I'll move over to Mick.
So he is one of those many cheap heroes of, cheap minor heroes. So he's pretty much the same as Baragon, but 5 points less. So if you were to be choosing between Baragon and Damrot, it seems to be the choice for Baragon to win. There isn't really any specific advantage. Well, I mean, he's got a wooden creature, but he is more likely to die in combat because of defense 5, unlike Baragon's defense 6. So, yeah, there isn't really much to say other than
he's Baragon.
Throw him in if you're not throwing in Baragon.
Now, would you rather have Bodyguard or Woodland Creature?
I think I would much rather have Bodyguard.
Bodyguard. Okay. Yep. And I think that's a general consent. I think you use Damrot in a Rangers list, and I think that's really where he's meant to be. But if you didn't have the 5 points or the 10 points for the upgrade to Baragon, I think then maybe you use Damrot. But I think you would always choose to use Baragon over Damrot in this,
or one of the new Ranger heroes like that. I think it's Angbor, the guy. You can spend 10 more points and get a guy that's basically Damrot's profile that gets a free point of might to shoot with every turn.
Yeah,
I think that's worth it for a guy.
You might almost just want to buy another banner for your army instead of taking Damrot.
Yeah, I think Damrot is very, very situational, and even when he is in that situation, you probably try to find a way to upgrade to Baragon or one of the other Rangers. All right, next one is a newly revamped model a little bit, and so I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about him. Kyrian. So I'll move that over to Matt.
Okay, so Kyrian, Lieutenant of Amun Barad. So he is a hero of fortitude, so he can lead 12 guys. Move 6, fight 4. He's a 3+ shoot, but he can't shoot with anything. He's strength 4, defense 6, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He's got a sword and a shield. And his heroic actions are resolve and strike. And his special rule is the boldest of the bold. So when he charges an enemy that causes terror, he gets a +2 bonus to his courage value. And he also gets a +2 bonus to his courage value when models with Blades of the Dead special rule make strikes against him. So, yeah, he has this special rule, which is useful, I think, if you're in a terror meta, or you're playing somebody who is going to bring the army of the dead against you. But I think his primary use is actually the fact that he is the cheapest heroic strike in this list. And I think that's his use. I mean, he's basically a captain level hero. He's 5 points more than a regular captain, and he has an extra point of might. and he has the ability to heroic strike, and I think that's his use. He's a little cheaper than the Knight of the White Tower, and he has 3 might rather than 2 might. So I think in a low points list, he's a decent guy to have as kind of your second heroic strike in the list, and I think that's what his use is.
He kind of reminds me profile wise, not profile wise and what he has, accepting the boldest of the bold special. He kind of reminds me of Grishnak, where he has 3 might at fight 4, defense 6 when you take him with a shield, and 3/1/1. He kind of is like Grishnak to me for good, where he just has that, yes, he's fight 4, but he does have 3 might for strikes, for moves, for and anything of that nature. But you don't tend to see Grishnak because, you'd rather take Gorebag. Is he one of those situations where you'd rather have Madril over Kyrian kind of a thing, so you don't see him because of that?
Yeah, I think most people would take Madril over Kyrian. But if you're doing a combat heavy as opposed to shooting heavy list with Minas Tirith, like I think Kyrian's probably the better choice just because he's got that strike. I mean, the other thing you could do is you could take both of them, right? I mean, in a low points list, Madril and Kyrian, and is Madril is your second hero to get the march, and Kyrian is your third hero to get the second strike. So like a Faramir Madril Kyrian combination is a good one at low points.
You could do that, but then if you were to pay 5 points more, then you can just take the next model on the list, which is Knight of the White Tower, who also has a strike, and therefore he will be the second cheapest striker, but also lives at fight 5 basic. So long term, he might be better in combat against basic troops than Kyrian would be.
Well, tell us more, Mick. Tell us more.
Oh yeah, especially if he goes up against fight 4 enemies. So Knight of the White Tower is, I don't think I've ever seen one anywhere in the game.
Well, has anyone ever seen Kyrian either? I've never seen Kyrian.
Oh yeah, well I've used
Kyrian.
I've used Kyrian.
Really? I've never seen him before. That's interesting. All right.
Because he is like the Grishnak, like you said. Yeah. So he pops up.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm pretty sure he used to be packaged with Madril in.
But I've never seen him on the table before.
Yeah, no, I have. But at the same time, Knight of the White Tower, I don't think I've ever seen a real model of Knight of the White Tower in my life.
I've seen it in videos, but I've never seen it on
I've seen it in grainy videos.
I've seen people play with him in videos, just not in real life.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he was in like some video standing next to Bigfoot or something like that.
So at some point, I was planning to bring an army to one of our duels, which was going to have 4 of these guys in it.
Oh.
So he is 60 points, move 6, fight 5, strength 4, defense 6, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4, and then 2/1/1. Dressed in a heavy armor, carries a dagger and a white sword of Gondor, which is a 200 sword with the mighty blow special rule. He has a heroic strike, and also if he rolls a natural 6 in a dual roll, he does not apply the penalty for using a 200 weapon. So there is this weird thing with Knight of the White Tower that if you do have a banner nearby, then there's a pretty decent chance that you might roll a natural 6 in a duel. So it's not out of question to basically just be walking around and fighting with this 200 weapon, which at fight 5 and strength 4 and the +1 to wounds.
I think Mighty Blow does 2 wounds.
Yeah, it does 2 wounds.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's still it's still a 200 weapon. So
so you get the +1 as well.
Yeah. So he is potentially quite good at cutting down troops. However, I think his biggest issue is that he basically doesn't exist as far as model.
He's in the command pack. No, I mean that's where he comes. He's in the Minas Tirith command pack.
Yeah, which if you ever take Boromir, Captain of the White Tower with the banner, then you very often don't even need the command pack. So
I mean, I don't own him. He's like the one guy in this list that I don't own, and I mean, maybe with a banner you would roll that 6. I know I would only roll a 5, and that's what terrifies me about this guy is that and the fact that he's only got 2 might rather than 3. And I would be terrified of spending his might on anything other than upping that 5 to a 6.
Yes. However, if you look at it from like a mathematical perspective, you roll on 2 dice, you roll a 6 about 31% of the time. On 3 dice, which is 2 dice, which is 2 attacks plus a banner, you roll a 6 about 42% of the time.
Well, actually,
so just about half the time you might actually get that 6.
Well, see, here's
almost half the time.
Well, here's the interesting thing, though, right? So it's a 2-handed weapon. So if you go in 2-handed and you roll a 5, it's a 4. But if you roll a 6, it's a 6. So
right.
So you can only ever get either a 4 or a 6. There is no 5 with this model.
There is no 5 with this model. That's right.
So you'd have to use 2 might if you
yes,
roll
you'd
a
have
5.
to use 2 might to get it. Well, to get it up to a 6. I mean, but on the other hand, if you rolled a 5 and the other guy rolled a 5, you could spend 1 point of might to get it up to a 5 and beat it.
There's still a dagger. So
that's interesting though. One of the only models that has, or one of the few models that has a 5 isn't a possibility in the entire game.
Yeah, but if you're going to use his dagger, spend 5 points less and get Kyrian.
That's true. Yeah. I fully agree. However, if you have a banner and you have a spear or maybe you validate some pikes, then there's a pretty good chance you're gonna be going 200 and getting those 6s and slashing through enemy modern orcs or whatever.
In theory, that is correct.
but that kind of defeats. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I would take this to fight heroes, not troops.
Yes, I think he's a hero because of the mighty blow.
So then when you're fighting Morannons, it's almost pointless because yes, you get the +1 to wound, but I mean, the 2 wound thing is basically useless. So why wouldn't you just use the dagger at that point? And then, like you said,
I mean, you do get the +1 to wound. So, and he's strength. I mean, if you're going against Morannons, he loses the benefit of the mighty blow, but assuming he wins the fight, and he's more likely to win the fight because he's going to win ties. Against Morannons. He's still wounding on 4s against Morannon orcs instead of 5.
Well, let's pretend you had a spear support behind him, right? And you're attacking 2 Morannon orcs. Are you using the sword or are you using the dagger?
I'm probably fighting 200 then, especially if there is a banner nearby and a spear. I'm definitely fighting 200.
Yeah, and if it's Boromir's banner, I might be 2-handed feigning. Because Boromir will buff the spear up to higher fight value.
That's an interesting point. Fair enough. Okay. Do you guys find? I know we're talking. Why would you take them over another low tier captain?
Well, the fact that he's fight 5 rather than fight 4 means that against things like dwarves, Uruk-hai, any sort of like elite evil men like in Harad, Abrakan guards, and all that stuff. That all sits at fight 4. So if you're taking a captain or a Kyrian, then very often you might just need to strike up with a Kyrian, and with the captain you can't guarantee that you're gonna be winning. But with this guy at 5/5, you can still going to come out with a dagger and still win those fights without really worrying about it.
Okay. All right. So I think.
Well, just to do a segue, there is one other reason why you might want to use him instead of one of these named guys, and that has to do with the next figure that's coming up.
Yeah, so that is the King of Men, and I will move that to Matt.
All right, so King of Men at 60 points. He's move 6, obviously, fight 5, strength 4, defense 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 5, 2 might, 2 will, 1 fate. So more or less kind of a jumped up captain profile with some additional courage and some additional fight. He has heroic march. He also has heroic defense, and you can kit him out. So he can get an armored horse, heavy armor, lance, shield. So you can kit this guy out to be guy on an armored horse with defense 7. And a lance, so he can be a decent heavy hitter. The downside of him is that he cannot be included in any army that contains any other named Gondor hero models, because the King of Men is supposed to be either a steward or a king from days gone by. And he's a decent model to have at really low points levels, so like at 350. And he has a couple of niche uses. Niche use number one is kind of at that really low points level. If you want kind of a fight 5 hero and you don't want to spend a lot of points to get it, and then maybe your second hero is your Knight of the White Tower thrown in beside him. The other niche use is as an ally for Earl the Young, because the King of Men is the only Gondor named hero that can be thrown in as an ally to an Earl the Young list, and they actually make a decent add to that list. So we've got a player around here who has an Earl the Young list, and he throws in Earl the Young with a King of Men or two, on horse, jumped up to that kind of fight 5 heavy lancer variant, which is actually a pretty decent profile, and uses them that way.
So obviously the huge thing about this profile is the fact that you cannot take Boromir, you cannot take Gandalf, you cannot take all the good things that make Minas Tirith their thing. I think you really only take this if you're going for like a weird theme kind of a thing. But overall, it's not a terrible profile by any means. It's just, I think you only really take it for theme. That's it. There's no reason you would ever choose to not take any of the other named heroes and choose this. So any other thoughts on him, or that's pretty much it?
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised he's only for Fortitude, because thematically...
Yeah, he would be valid by that definition. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, he would be valid.
He definitely would be valid. Yeah. That's a very good point, Nick.
I think the other random king profiles in the book are also Fortitude, because aren't the Dwarven kings also Fortitude?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or are they Valor now?
Valor.
No, they're Fortitude.
I think the rough thing is, though, these guys can only lead certain armies, so you're kind of like pigeonholed.
No, but this is a good point, though, with the whole king thing, especially with the dwarves, because I know when I played dwarves, I wish the king was 15. I could add a few more models to it. I'm surprised by that, actually. I'm surprised that something like when you have the name king, you are supposed to be better than a captain. So by definition, you should have a higher tier of how many troops you can lead. That.
I mean, with that said, it is a decent profile for kind of a captain level hero, because he gets the extra will, he gets the extra fight, and with defense 7 and a lance, like if you've got a really small list that say only has like one hero in a warband, I think he's a good choice.
Okay, we'll move on to the final profile for the regular book, which is the Captain of Minas Tirith. So I'll move that over to Matt again, and he can go over that.
All right, so this is 50 points. And he's got the definition of the standard captain profile: fight 4, strength 4, defense 6, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate. You can put him on a horse and give him a lance and a shield, upping him to defense 7, which is is a pretty decent build for him. He also has the shield wall special rule, so if you want to throw him in the front of a shield wall, you can up him to defense 8 if he's got the shield, gets the shield wall bonus. He's a guy you rarely see now, and I think that's because, the reason you take him is to get the heroic march, and there are other ways to get heroic march. I think the only time you'd really see him is if you were trying to do some sort of mounted version of this army, and you wanted some source of march that wasn't a guy standing on the ground, in which case you take the captain on horse with lance, which is, a decent lancer profile. They're pretty good They're pretty good guys when you put them on a lance. They're not terribly expensive, but I think the main reason you don't see these guys is because Gondor has many other decent captain level heroes that provide more than just this guy does for a reasonable amount of additional points.
All right. Thank you for tuning in this week. Next week, we're going to move into the Gondor at War episode, and then we'll also be going over the warriors and the siege weapons. So stay tuned for that. If you have any lists that you'd like to submit to us for future episodes, put those in the comment section below. And any ideas you'd like for us to discuss in future episodes, leave those as well. Thank you for tuning in this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.